At the hunter's village, Chidiebere had grown into a fearless and humble young man of 18. He had learnt hunting from his father Ogbonna and was a very good hunter. One day, while hunting deep in the forest, he heard a sharp scream. The scream came from deep in the trees, cut short, as if a hand had closed over it. Chidiebere was already moving before he decided to move, bow in hand, feet finding the path his father had taught him to read like a second language. What he found in the clearing stopped his blood cold. 4 men and a young woman on her knees between them, wrists bound, a blade resting flat against her throat, not yet cutting, but close enough that one wrong word could change that. 4 men. He had 1 bow, 3 arrows, and a knife meant for skinning deer. Without thinking, he shot an arrow in a flash. The first shot took the man holding the blade through the shoulder, and for one terrible heartbeat, the blade jerked toward the woman's throat before his grip failed and he staggered back, howling. Then everything happened at once. The other 3 came at him together. His second arrow flew wild, catching nothing but air, and after that there was no more time for arrows at all. A club caught him across the ribs and drove the breath from his body. He went down hard into the leaf litter, ears ringing, and looked up in time to see a machete rising above him, already falling. He rolled. The blade buried itself in the earth where his chest had been a heartbeat before. He came up with his knife and drove it into the nearest leg, not caring where, only that it was flesh. The man screamed and folded. Chidiebere was on his feet again, blood sliding from a gash along his scalp he did not remember taking, when the third man seized him from behind, forearm closing hard across his throat. The world began to narrow at the edges. His knife had fallen somewhere in the leaves. His hands clawed uselessly at the arm crushing his windpipe, and for one drowning moment he understood with total clarity that this was how his life would end, in a clearing no one would find for days, over a woman whose name he did not yet know. It was the young woman, hands still bound but free enough to move, who threw herself against the man's legs with everything she had left, and the arm around Chidiebere's throat loosened just long enough for him to twist free and drive his elbow into the man's jaw. The man dropped. The 2 who could still run dragged their fallen companions into the trees and vanished. Chidiebere knelt in the dirt a long moment before he could stand. "You are safe," he managed, though his own voice did not sound steady, and blood from his scalp had begun sliding warm down the side of his face. He cut her wrists free. She only nodded, too frightened to speak, and let him half carry her the long walk back through the trees into the village. He did not remember most of that walk, only the taste of blood, the sound of his own heartbeat, and Ifeoma's hand gripping his arm as though letting go might bring those men back. Now at home, Ineoma had barely finished cleaning the wound above his eye when the sound of horses reached the compound. Too many horses for good news. Some old instinct in her went cold before she even understood why. It was Chief Diobi, the father of the girl Chidiebere rescued. He had been searching tirelessly for her after she was kidnapped 2 days ago. Chief Diobi arrived himself, not merely his men, dust from 2 days of hard riding still thick on his wrapper, his face carved from something harder than fear. A dozen armed guards rode behind him, and behind them, word had already moved through the village that the trader's daughter had been found, alive, but found alone with a hunter's son no one outside this village had ever heard of. Ifeoma tried to speak. 2 days of terror and a blow to the head during the struggle had left her voice thin and her thoughts slower than they needed to be in that moment, and what came out of her was not enough. She was found with him alone, wounded, someone said. He must be one of the kidnappers and must have quarreled with his own partners over the prize when he decided to keep her for himself. Chief Diobi did not ask Chidiebere a single question. He looked at him the way a man looks at something he has already decided to destroy. "Bind him," he said. "He answers to me at dawn in 3 days once my daughter is well enough to speak properly of what was done to her. If our account does not clear him, he dies before this village. A lesson to any man who thinks a chief's daughter is a prize enough to kill for." Ogbonaya threw himself at the chief's feet. "He saved her. I swear it on every god this village prays to." "Then he has 3 days to prove it," Diobi said, and did not look down again. Nelma offered everything they owned, the hut, the goats, years of labor, to any guard who would listen, and was met only with silence. And the particular pity men reserve for those they had already decided cannot be helped. She did not stop offering. She offered again the next morning and the morning after that, because a mother's math is different from other people's. There was no price too high, no humiliation too great, if it bought her son even 1 more hour of breathing. They bound Chidiebere to a post at the center of the compound where the whole village could watch him wait through the heat of that day and the cold of the night that followed. Children were kept from passing too close, as though guilt was something a person could catch by proximity. Old friends who had shared his fire found reasons to be elsewhere. Only Neoma came to him openly, morning and evening, pressing water to his cracked lips and refusing to be chased off by guards too tired of her persistence to keep trying. The first day passed, then the second. Ifeoma's fever broke slowly, her memory of the attack returning only in fragments too broken yet to be called testimony. And with each hour she remained too weak to speak clearly. The whispers around the compound hardened a little further into certainty. On the second night, when the nearest guards had drunk more palm wine than duty allowed, Ogbonaya came to him in the dark, with a blade already working at the ropes. "Run now," he whispered, "while there is still a chance. We will follow when we can. I would rather have a living son in exile than a dead one at dawn." 2 days bound to a post had left his wrists raw and his body aching in ways the fight itself had not managed. Freedom in that moment was not an abstract thing. It had a taste almost. Cool water, an open road, a version of his life where none of this had ever happened. For one long moment, Chidiebere let himself imagine it. The forest opening around him, the ropes gone, 3 days becoming a lifetime of never looking back. Then he thought of what would happen to the 2 people kneeling in front of him if their son vanished the night before judgment. The accusation that would fall on them. The hut and the goats Diobi's men would burn on their way out of a village that had sheltered a fled criminal. "If I disappear tonight," he said quietly, "they will believe every word said against me, and they will punish you for raising the man who proved it true. I do not care what they believe. I do." His voice caught. "You taught me to be a man who stands in the truth, even when it cost him everything. I will not become someone else on the one night it matters most." Seeing that his son would not budge, Ogbonaya wept without sound and left the ropes exactly as he had found them. The truth came in the end, not from a search or a confession freely given, but from men too foolish to live well enough alone. On the third night, with judgment only hours away, Chidiebere, still bound, still watched, sleep refusing to come, heard movement near the hut where Ifeoma lay recovering. Not a guard's footstep, something lower, something careful. His heart began to hammer before his mind had finished deciding why. He strained against the ropes uselessly, and for a moment considered staying silent. A bound man crying out in the dark might only make Diobi's men trust him less, not more. But the sound came again, closer to Ifeoma's hut than any accident should be, and silence suddenly felt like the more dangerous choice. He shouted before he understood why, loud enough to wake the whole compound, loud enough to bring guards running with torches, just as a shadow broke from the hut's rear wall and fled into the dark, dropping in his haste the very blade that once rested against Ifeoma's throat. They caught him before the tree line. Wounded already from Chidiebere's arrow days before, he had little strength left to run and even less courage left to lie. He confessed everything before the sun rose. How they kidnapped the chief's daughter, how Chidiebere rescued her from them, and the desperate plan to silence the chief's daughter that night because she was the only witness who could name them before Chidiebere's judgment made further violence unnecessary. By the time the sun cleared the palm trees, the truth Chidiebere had spent 3 days waiting to be believed no longer needed anyone's convincing. It had announced itself in the dark on its own terms, the way truth so often waits until it is nearly too late. Chief Diobi cut the ropes himself. He did not apologize. Powerful men rarely do. But he looked at Chidiebere for a long moment with something that might, in a different man, have been shame. It was Ifeoma, steadier now, who noticed the small ivory pendant at his throat as she knelt to thank him properly. A mark she had seen once before on the seal of a trader who did business with the royal house of Umuafo. "Where did you get this?" she asked, going very still. "My father found it with me," Chidiebere said, "the night he found me as a baby. I have carried it my whole life and never known what it means." She said nothing more of it to him. But when her father's caravan finally carried her home, she carried the memory of that mark with her too, and described it carefully to the one man in her father's household who had traveled to Umuafo more times than he could count. The old trader's hands froze over the kola knot he had been about to break as Ifeoma described the pendant. "Where," he asked, slowly, "could this young man have gotten this?"